Will the Virginia Tech Hokies be the toughest test Miami has faced so far?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Mario Cristobal said that toughest test to date for Miami. Conference opponent Cristobal also mentioned that when you start conference play, Miami's been all non-conference so far for their impressive 4-0 start. But when you start conference play, Cristobal referred to it as playoffs, right? And it is worth noting, I do believe Miami's team is different this year. The quarterback is certainly different from what they've had in recent years. Miami did the past 2 seasons go 3-5 in ACC play. I think it's going to be much, much better this year. And also, I'm trying to talk myself into like how Virginia Tech can make this a really difficult game, but they've been underwhelming so far this season. Let's bring in our very good friend, Brian Smith. He's the recruiting overlord in these parts, and we will talk recruiting with Brian as well. So, I mean, Brian, obviously Virginia Tech has not hit their crescendo yet, and Miami's been very good through 4 games. Virginia Tech is 2-2, lost to Vanderbilt, lost this past weekend to Rutgers. Their offense, really, Kyron Drones has not done as well as I expected him to do to this point, which has been really odd. Like, in your mind, what has to happen on Friday if the Hokies can pull off the upset?
They need to be +3 in the turnover margin. Which in the past, you and I wouldn't have been shocked with because Miami shot themselves in the foot. But this team doesn't. So barring Virginia Tech completely getting its act together, I think this game's over by the end of the third quarter. That's just the way the teams are playing. Like Virginia Tech has turned into Miami in terms of like, how can we screw ourselves up here? They just, an interception, a missed read, a missed run gap fit. They just have colossal mistakes. And Miami's cleaned themselves up, and they're 4-0 for a reason.
Yeah, and a couple things. Virginia, I agree with you on the turnover margin, by the way. Like, they have got to be big in the plus to win this game. The other thing for Virginia Tech is they've got to start fast. That's something they haven't done this year. So in their 2 losses this season, which were against like the only real teams that they faced so far, they were down 14-0 after the first quarter against Rutgers. So they were dug in an immediate hole. They were down 17-3 at halftime against Vanderbilt in the opener. Now, in both of those games, they made them close late. It's like their offense wakes up in the second half, but you can't wait till the second half against the Hurricanes.
Yeah, that means you're down 27-3, something like that. Miami will stomp you if you give it the opportunity. And obviously, Cam Ward is not taking any prisoners. He's a prime Heisman candidate for a reason. If Virginia Tech starts slow, if they're not motivated or they just aren't ready, it'll be a bloodbath. So Miami hasn't been slowed down by anybody yet. Does Virginia Tech have that defense? Probably not. But at the same time, they're going to play hard and they're going to give you everything they got. I'm sure they're going to play one of their better games and not their best game of the season. I just think they got like you, they got to survive that first quarter. They got to, if they're down like 10-7 or something like that, no biggie. But if they're down like 14-0 after 1, the game's over. You can't do that against Miami or any quality team, especially when, let's be honest, Virginia Tech hasn't given itself its own great vibes. You just can't. It's Groundhog Day for them. They suck in the beginning of the game, and I don't know what it's for. But you look at the scoreboard, you're like, what's going on, Virginia Tech? Every week it's the same stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. And by the way, when the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, joins us, he's brought to you by LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And speaking of recruiting, this is an interesting stat. I read this. I was reading through some preview material on the Virginia Tech Hokies 24/7 site. Like, this is not on their message board. This is their staff writers writing a game preview for this matchup. And they painted a pretty grim picture for Virginia Tech, but this is something very interesting from a recruiting standpoint, Brian. Now, having more talent does not guarantee victories, right? If that was the case, Notre Dame would not have lost to NIU. Miami would not be 3-5 in the ACC the past 2 years. So having more talent does not guarantee anything in college football, but this is pretty glaring. In 3 seasons under Mario Cristobal, Miami has signed 40 4-star and 5-star high schoolers. That's more than Virginia Tech has signed if you added up every recruiting class since 2014, where they've signed 39 in the last 10 years, 4- and 5-star players. Miami has signed more than that in the past 3 recruiting cycles. So that paints a picture again. You better go out there and win.
Yeah, that's a lot of disparity. It's not like remotely close. And I'm not trying to pick on Tech,
Right.
but something tells me that Miami's depth, especially for their defense, will come in handy in this kind of game. So you're chasing around a mobile quarterback, a big guy who can run you over. And of course, Miami likes to rotate players a lot anyway on offense when they run go routes and stuff with receivers. They got plenty of those. So I think Miami's in a pretty good spot. They've maximized on it too. You and I talk about recruiting all the time, but they don't have a lot of holes on the roster anymore where you can really kind of focus on it and mitigate other areas on the team where Miami's good. They're in a good spot. I think Miami's got a top 5 to top 8 team in the country, and I also think that Virginia Tech's about to find out about that.
Yeah, and there are some players on Virginia Tech that can give Miami some problems. Their top pass rusher, Antoine Powell-Ryland, has already 5.5 sacks on the season so far. So they like to bring pressure. They like to pressure opposing quarterbacks. Miami's offensive line has done very well to this point. So is Cam Ward escaping pressure, but Virginia Tech is going to test them there. The Hokies have an excellent running back in Bryce Schulte-Tutin, who's already scored 7 rushing touchdowns this year. He's just under 400 yards rushing in 4 games. He's one of the top in the ACC, one of the top in the country in that category thus far. And they do have some big physical corners who can give Miami some problems. Mansour Delane, Dorian Strong. So there's definitely some talent on that Hokie side. But I want to talk some recruiting here with Brian Smith when we come back, because there's going to be a very compelling visitor for this game who's committed to a different program. Now, it's a perfect tie-in because I want to talk about how, Miami, their prolific passing game, how that can attract receiver talent out of high school. Here's another possibility. Miami already has 2 excellent receivers verbally committed in this class, but could their success lead to more? You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. My friends, with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up all the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investment involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Brian Smith, the recruiting overlord, is with us. So, Brian, I did a double take when I looked at the visitors list as reported by Gabby Urrutia from 24/7 Sports, because I see a name on there, a 4-star wide receiver out of Monarch High School in Pompano Beach, Florida, Samari Reed. Now, why that's interesting is Samari Reed is currently verbally committed to the Ole Miss Rebels, who, by the way, have almost as prolific of a passing game as Miami does right now. Jackson Dart is tearing it up over there, but Reed is obviously a South Florida kid. He's 6'2", 185 pounds. Have you had a chance to scout Samari Reed? Talk to us about this player.
I'd imagine he's a little bigger than that. I think he's closer to 200 pounds. Saw him last year when he played against Jacksonville Mandarin, and he's a big, strong kid. I'd imagine he could play the boundary spot or flanker. He's got good speed, and he's got really big, powerful hands. He's a grown man for a high school kid. I'm kind of surprised he doesn't get more recruiting attention, but Ole Miss wasn't afraid to take him, and I think Lane Kiffin knows a little bit about passing the football. So that's probably a good spot to look at. I'm curious why Miami waited this long. I know they went after a lot of big fish. I don't know if they're just not sure what's going to happen with Jamie French and some other guys, but it's an interesting thing to have this kid come up to campus for a game. We'll see how that goes, but this is a good football player.
Yeah, here's a question I get a lot. If, we see all the success Miami is having in their passing game, right, which can obviously be attractive to high school quarterbacks to see, hey, I can thrive in this offense, and to high school receivers. But a lot of people will point out, well, for high school receivers, is watching what Cam Ward is doing, knowing they wouldn't actually play with him when they get to Miami because he's a one and done guy at the U. Like, is it still enticing, like, to these wide receivers, knowing, hey, Miami runs a style of offense where I can get a lot of looks, but that quarterback who's tearing it up is not going to be here when I get there?
I think it has a little impact because, you know what year he is, but I still think that you're right. The style is more important. They'll find somebody else, but this is the kind of offense I can see myself in. Who doesn't want to go score a bunch of points and win games? I mean, that's the whole objective. So, yeah, I think it's more stylistic, and I think Miami will benefit. If they can just get one more receiver like, Samari or somebody else to go, they'd have a definite elite class. So why not one more big-time player for the receiver group?
Yeah, Miami has verbal commits from Malachi Toney, who just reclassified from 26 to 25. Excellent player from American Heritage. They've got Dalen Upshaw verbally committed, another excellent player at receiver. But then you hear a lot of these other names about, like, potential flips, like names that won't go away, Brian, like Joshua Moore, who's committed to Florida. Tyler Williams, who's committed to Georgia. I still hear his name come up a lot. Dallas Wilson, who's committed to Oregon. Like, all these players are saying the right things about the schools that they're verbally committed to. But if you follow the visits, they seem to still be checking out other programs, these guys. I mean, out of any of those names, do you think maybe one of them or two of them may be potential flip candidates for Miami?
I still think there are some other guys that are possibilities too, because Miami just does such a good job. But trying to pick one guy is really, really hard. I don't know, but the way they're throwing the ball, I think any of them are. I've still been surprised that Dallas is still committed to Oregon. That one maybe is a pick, but Miami's in on all of them. If they don't get any with all the effort they put in, you can't fault them. So that's the other thing. I just don't know which one it's going to be. It's a good option from any of them, Tyler, Dallas, etc. They're all very good.
So a player that Miami has recruited in the past, Floyd Buchard, defensive tackle from Miami Central, he was committed to Oklahoma. He decommitted from the Sooners this week. And I was reading what our mutual friend John Garcia was writing about Buchard and Rivals since he decommitted, and he mentioned Florida, Miami, USC, and I think USC is going to be the next place he visits, and Colorado. So those four, Florida, Miami, USC, and Colorado, could possibly get back in the mix for him. I haven't heard like anything that concrete about Miami being back in it for him, but I certainly have to wonder because this is a guy that they recruited heavily.
I was surprised they didn't get him the first round. Oklahoma getting a kid that lives in South Florida is weird, but you got to remember Floyd's originally from Canada, so location to him is not as big a deal. That being the case, you never can have enough big defensive tackles. So we'll see what Miami does, but I think they would be wise to take. I saw him in Under Armour this past winter. He's really, really good. So I think that he would be well deserving of a push from the Miami staff.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with that. Another player that Miami, as of recently, has seemingly still been pushing for is Ohio State committed linebacker TJ Alford. You think he's still looking around a little bit, or is he solid with the Buckeyes?
Most people think he'll sign there, but he's still looking. Like, he's not dropped off communication with everybody else, from what I understand. We'll see how that goes, but here's the key, as always. Does he take another trip to Coral Gables or to a football game at Hard Rock? If he does, then you know you got something. We still have a long way to signing day, Mr. Alex. A long, long way.
We sure do. But by the way, I don't have you had a chance to digest what's happening at UNLV, with Matt Sluka
Oh,
specifically? It's like, I mean, where do we even and I don't even know whose side to be on, Brian, because this is like the biggest game of he said, she said. Because on the Matt Sluka side, but this is UNLV's transfer quarterback. And UNLV, by the way, they're in the college football playoff picture in the group of five. Like they're if they continue to win there, they could get into that CFP at the end of the year. And their starting quarterback 3 games in decides to redshirt the rest of the year, and he's going to be leaving the program because he claims that a certain NIL promise was get him to transfer there, $100,000 promise, and then he said he got that promise from the coaching staff, but then apparently there was nothing in writing from the collective, and then they claimed they didn't know anything about it. UNLV accused him of like trying to basically shake them down for extra money once he got there. So it's a messy he said she said thing, but it's like, is stuff like this, is this going to become the norm now, when it comes to the lack of regulation and transparency with NIL?
I hope not, but nothing seems to be trending in the right direction as far as eligibility at NIL. So the only thing I can think is you get a 5th year automatically to alleviate this. Other than that, I don't think you can do anything about it. You're getting into a situation where it's not just NCAA rules, it's state law and stuff like that with NIL. And yeah, I mean, they got that rule now. You can play 4 games in redshirt.
Yep.
So, I mean, there are guys for a lot of teams that have done it. It's not just quarterbacks either. Defensive backs, D lineman, the big defensive tackle from USC just said he was doing. Come in.
That's right. Bear Alexander, what has he played for like 6 schools in 4 years already?
Oh,
He's
it's
moved around a lot.
ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But whatever. The point is still the same. It's probably here to stay, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. They got to come up with something that I don't see to alleviate it. And kids are going to take the money. That's what this is. That's the problem. Like they created a monster and they didn't think far enough ahead, which the NCAA never does. And now they're getting slapped around 100%.
Yeah. All right, there's another recruit I wanted to ask you about, a name that has come up a lot, but he's remained committed to Florida State, and you know a lot about Florida State. Solomon Thomas, how solid does he seem to be as the 5-star interior offensive lineman? Does he still seem very solid with Florida State, or could there be an opening there?
I haven't heard anything that makes me think he's like definitely leaving the class.
Right.
But they have to recruit him through signing day. I know that from just talking to him earlier this year and from talking to a couple other sources. Everybody's going to recruit that kid until after his paperwork is done. He's a difference maker. So you're going to go after him. Miami's still in the mix. I just think Florida State, for lack of a better term, they're in the lead. That's how I would look at it. So Atkins is a really good offensive line coach. He's got a good relationship with him. And it's a lot closer from Jacksonville to go to Florida State. Maybe that's a factor, but still, Miami is not going to give up. That's something you know.
No doubt about that. Well, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure you follow Brian Smith on X at FBScout_Florida. And Brian, are you on TikTok? Because I just joined it last week, and I feel like I should be doing some dances or something. Like maybe we can get together and do a dance. Are you on? I just joined TikTok. Can you follow me on there? Are you on it?
I've got an account, but no. And if I dance with you, they will kick you off TikTok.
Nobody wants to see me dance, let alone you and me together. So don't worry. We're not going to do it.
That's terrible for all parties involved.
We appreciate you guys. And we'll talk more tomorrow about the matchup with the Virginia Tech Hokies. The line's been moving around quite a bit. It was like Miami favored by 17, then it got up to 19. It's back to 17.5. So the bettors cannot seem to make up their mind on that spread. But I feel pretty confident on the Hurricane side. Brian Smith does awesome work. Make sure you guys check him out. And my friends, we will talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.